or also it's known as Devanagari. And Devanagari, by the way, actually, does anyone know what Devanagari means?
Devanagari, yes.
What does it mean?
It's a place, I believe.
Okay.
Because the text is the first text. Yeah, the first little text on India.
Yeah, it's the way that Sanskrit text is described. It actually means the language of the gods, Deva, the Devas, the Devatas. So because we have Ellie the angel with us, she would have known that anyway, but she's just keeping quiet. So of course, angels all know the language of the gods. So this is considered the language of the gods. So what's happened is just to keep the book as authentic as possible, the original Sanskrit is left in the book. So my first suggestion to everyone, when you get the Gita, or if you have the Gita and you open it and look at it, don't get bewildered if you can't read this text, because that's pretty normal. But I have given the book over the few years that I've been around. We give the books out to people. And in the back of the book, there's something called the Sanskrit Pronunciation Guide. So I have a friend that I actually met first time just on the street, and I gave him a book. And he became so inspired by Sanskrit that he graduated from Oxford with a degree in the Sanskrit language. And he started just by learning Sanskrit from the back of this book. So this is how powerful the book is. Depending on how you approach it, there are many, many things that you can learn from it. So, but initially, you don't need to get too bewildered by the Sanskrit unless you want to get into it. But if you look below the Sanskrit, the original Devanagari, you'll see that there's what's called the Roman transliteralization. So that down here, you can see my cursor moving around. Yeah, you can see it on the screen.
Yeah.
Okay. So this down here is this put into Roman letters. So for those of us who are, English readers, then we can at least make sense of this. And then what you get, because this is the first text of the Gita, then what you get is, sorry, let me just do it. Yeah, so then what you get is this, which is the Roman transliteralization. Then you'll find what are known as the synonyms. So then Prabhupada, the author, he takes each of those Sanskrit terms and he translates them into English. So in this way, he's making it very clear and authentic that he's taking the Sanskrit, putting it into Roman letters, and then he's giving the translation word for word. Does that make sense? Everyone kind of understands? So what I'm doing is just trying to help you gain access to the book, because the first time you get it, it can be very bewildering when you see this and that, and you don't know. I just thought, how am I meant to read this thing? It's really confusing. But it's because it's sort of like a spiritual textbook. Just like you get in school, you get a certain books that if you just open them up, if you go to chemistry class and you try to read the chemistry book without some help or introduction into it, it might be a little difficult. So this is really meant to help you to demystify it and not be bewildered. So after the synonyms, then there's a translation. So after it gives the word for word translation, then there's an entire translation of the Gita, of those word for words put together. And then after that, he'll give what's known as a purport. And that means it's an explanation that is being given to help everyone understand the translation. And these purports, or these explanations, are a culmination of generations of sages and scholars and sadhus who have studied the Gita and who have helped to reveal the deeper meanings and understandings of the Gita. So what we have in front of us here is a culmination of at least 5 to 6 centuries of wisdom with us. And here it is, just like in our hand in the year 2020. But actually, around in the early 1500s, most of the commentaries are coming from around that time, and some from even long before that. Let me just, I can't do it. Okay. So, so more from the preface here, that yeah, Prabhupada says he if he has any credit, he's just trying to present the Bhagavad-gita as it is, and so he's trying to present it in without any adulteration. So he's trying to make sure that what is being given is exactly what's in the original text. And he just wants everyone to be benefited by studying this. So the whole point is that it's not mundane study, but it's a sublime kind of mission of spiritual benefit and growth, like that. Okay, so is everyone still with me so far?
Yeah.
Okay. So Bhagavad-gita, what does Bhagavad-gita mean? What do you think it actually means? Because it's not an English term, and I don't think it's French or Spanish, or it's not Greek or Chinese. It's obviously coming from Sanskrit. Anyone has any ideas what Bhagavad-gita actually means?
It's a tale of God.
The what? Say it again. No, go ahead, Nitai.
Stories or tales related to God or godly men, or godly people.
Okay, that sounds nice. Okay, things that are related to God, godly men or godly people. Okay, close. Any other thoughts?
The song of God?
Yes, very nice. So yeah, Gita actually means song, and Bhagavad is a way of referring to God, like that. So Bhagavan is the word, it means possessor of 6 opulences, and we're going to discuss that a little more in a moment. But the word Bhagavad comes from the term Bhagavan, and that means possessor of 6 opulences. And Gita means song. So actually, the Sanskrit, if you read it properly, it's actually more sung. It's like a melody. Yeah, it's like a melody. I just want to know how I can turn off my. What is still on? Anyway, I can't seem to turn it off. So it's actually sung. So the verses are more. It's more melodious. It's like poetry that's being sung. So it's very, very special. So basically, it means the song of God. So what are these 6 opulences that we were talking about? So these are the 6 opulences. Okay, so Bhagavan means one who possesses these 6 opulences in full. So first one is intelligence. So all of you are very intelligent. I have no doubt you're actually probably a lot more intelligent than me. I never went to university. I barely made it out of American high school. And so I'm actually quite, bit thick, mate. You know what I'm saying? So, it's I'm not very intelligent, but all of you are very intelligent. But no matter how intelligent you are, how many PhDs, there's almost always somebody a little bit more intelligent. And then is there anyone who actually knows everything? So one with complete opulence would be someone who is is it omniscient? Is that the word, omniscient? That is all knowing. Then wealth. So wealth is an opulence. As we see in the world at the moment, I think the richest man in the world is the guy who owns Amazon. Is that right?
Yeah, that's
So,
yeah.
Yeah, that Vishal knows that one. That's for sure. So, yeah, we know who the wealthiest man in the world is. So when you have a lot of money, I mean, let's be honest. Who here would like to have a lot of money? Raise your hand. Okay. Come on, yes, don't be shy. Don't try to be like, no, money for me. I'm trying to be a poor man. Yeah, poor person. We all want to have some money. So we'd like to have millions and billions and trillions. So wealth is an opulence. So, but even though, what is the name of this guy from Amazon? I don't remember his name.
Jeff Bezos.
Jeff
Jeff
what?
Bezos. Bezos
Oh,
or Bezos?
Bezos. That's right, Jeff Bezos. Yeah. So even if Jeff Bezos is supposedly the richest man on the planet, but still there are people who are richer, and there are people who probably have lots and lots of land and property, and we have to see who is the owner of everything. That's the important thing. Who actually owns everything? Another one is strength. Now, I don't know if you guys know who this person is. Do you know who Popeye is? Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes I realize that, I'm old, and young people are like, well, who is that? So, of course, Popeye, when I was growing up, Popeye used to eat his spinach, and he had big muscles. So you have lots of strength. I can see a few of the lads here on the program this evening are, a little muscular. They got some, they got a bit of strength there. Nitin's looking like he works out at the gym a couple of times a week.
Nah.
Vishal, I'm not sure. I think he just lifts a cup of tea to his mouth every now and then. But so strength is an opulence, and they had the strongest man in the world. Arnold Schwarzenegger at one point was Mr. Universe, So strength is always an opulence. Then we have the opulence of beauty. Of course, this is something that people are always looking for, and everyone's being judged according to whether they look like the mannequins in the window displays on Oxford Street or not, whether they look like the fashion models on the cover of the magazines or on TV. But in general, if people are very beautiful and attractive, then that's an opulence. And all of these things, in general, these opulences are usually attractive features. People are attracted to them, and they're attracted by them. Fame. The Beatles, we've been reading the Chant and Be Happy book. At one point, it was declared that the Beatles were more famous than God. So like that, then wherever they would go, there would be throngs of people who would just, lose their mind. Girls screaming, fainting, whenever they would see them because they were so famous. I don't know who the famous bands are now, One Direction or something like that. Someone told me they're famous. Yeah, okay, the guys are all like, no. Famous people, if you see a famous person, I've seen people almost wreck their car and kill the whole family because they see especially in London, you always see these film shoots going on, and people start, oh, look, they're shooting a film. I wonder who's the famous person over there. Or if you see the paparazzi there, or, so if you see someone famous, it's an opulence. And the last opulence, the last of the six, is renunciation. And that's an interesting opulence because it means the opulence of not being attached to any of the opulences. And that's an opulence. It's an attractive thing. People are actually attracted to very renounced people, which is why people are often attracted to the sadhus and the sages of India, because they walk around in like a diaper, and they have long dreads, and they live in the Himalayas, and they don't care about society. People are like, that is so cool. I wish I could be like that. Maybe not everyone is attracted, but at the same time, it is an attractive feature, and it is an opulence to be detached. So that is an opulence. And in general, you may know some people who have a lot of these opulences or a few of them in abundance, but hardly do we see anyone who possesses all six of them. What to speak of, I mean, I know some, there's Albert. He's very intelligent. I don't know if he was rich, but he was famous. You could say he was strong mentally, but I don't think he's really so beautiful. Of course, they say beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but like that. But I don't know if he was really so renounced either. So people may have some of the opulences, but it's unlikely they possess all of them. What to speak of all of them in full. So the idea is that God, he possesses all of these opulences in full, in totality, because he's the origin of everything. So in one sense, he's obviously the most famous. He's the most wealthy because everything belongs to him because he created it all. He's the most beautiful. The word Krishna, it actually means the all attractive, the most attractive personality. He's obviously the most intelligent because he created intelligence. He's the strongest because he can create or do anything at any time. And he's the most renounced because actually he's not attached to any of it. So, and he's beyond it. So these things we'll discuss a little bit more, but these are the principles of the word Bhagavan. It means one who possesses these 6 opulences. Anyone has any questions on this so far? It makes a little bit of sense. Everyone's still with me?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. It's relatively intriguing. We're okay. It's not like boring so much like you wish that you could watch another episode of Friends or something like that. No?
No, it's great. Thank you.
Okay. So an interesting point is that there was a movie a few years back. I don't know. It might even have been almost 10 years ago. As you can see, Will Smith and Matt Damon, they look very young in it. But there was a movie that was called The Legend of Bagger Vance. And it was about a caddy. You know what a caddy is, like when you play golf? He's the person that drags your bag around on the golf course. So the golfer, he's the main person, and the caddy is the guy who just drags the bags. He's basically a glorified slave with all due respect. But in this movie, Will Smith played Bagger Vance, and he was the caddy of Matt Damon, who was the golfer. And basically, they took the word Bagger Vance from the word Bhagavan. And Will Smith, he was playing the part of Krishna, and Matt Damon was Arjuna, and Will Smith was instructing Matt Damon on the golf course. And the golf course was 18 holes, and the Bhagavad-gita has 18 chapters. And on each hole, he was giving certain lessons, and they were relevant to his life. So it was a real interesting play on the idea of the Bhagavad-gita. And so like that. So it's just an interesting thing. To be honest, I've never seen the movie. I saw some clips of it on YouTube, but I never saw the whole thing. But it's interesting because the Bhagavad-gita psychology or philosophy has, gone into modern society. And as far as I'm aware, Will Smith has read the Bhagavad-gita. His daughter, Willow, is his daughter's name Willow? She's very active with the devotees. In fact, Janavi Harrison and her are very close friends. They've just been recording an album together. So the family is very much connected with the Krishna consciousness. Okay, so everyone's still good. We can keep going. No one's falling asleep. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Vrishna, you have to give me feedback later if I'm boring all the you can just.
It's all good. All great so far.
Send me back to the old person's home. Okay. Okay, so now we're gonna try to set the scene of the Bhagavad Gita, so that we get an understanding of what's actually going on in the book, because it can also be a little confusing. So for me, it was very confusing to find out that what was supposed to be one of the most spiritual books, if not the most spiritual book on the planet, was the setting for it is a battlefield. And I was like, hello, I want to read a book that makes me hear birds chirp and streams flow and, clouds floating through the air and, and all of a sudden it's like I start reading the book and it's like people are about to kill each other. I thought, how is this spiritual? If and when I first started reading, I was living in America, and of course, there was a street in my town where people shoot each other every night. It's like it's like the Wild West. So I thought, if I want to see that, I can just go outside. So I just thought, how can this be a book about spirituality? Not to mention the fact that the thing is 5,000 years old, and how is it relevant to me in the modern day? But actually, it's very relevant, because the Bhagavad-gita, being situated on a battlefield, it's synonymous with our own situation. If we're really honest, as much as we try to be optimistic about life, but life every day is a little bit of a battle. Ellie was saying that she's been a little unwell at the moment. Look at the world around us. People are literally fighting to stay alive. Societies are fighting to keep economies in place. Daily, people are fighting with the struggles of their own minds. Lockdown, I remember hearing so much about domestic violence when this lockdown started, about how people are suffering in so many ways because of this lockdown situation. Even when things are going good, people are still struggling to go to work. Sometimes I remember, especially when I was working in the city of London in the investment banking industry, and I used to have to get up. It was a battle just to get out of bed in the morning. Most people, it's like you have to peel your face off the pillow, after hitting the snooze button at least 3 to 4 times. Sometimes people have 2 or 3 alarm clocks because they just can't get out of bed. With all due respect, if someone is inspired in life, they get out of bed before the alarm clock goes off, So most people it's just a battle to get out of bed. Then it's a battle to get ready. If you have a family, it's a battle to get the kids ready. It's a battle to get to work. Anyone who has to travel on the, underground, or get the bus, or drive in traffic, people are stressed out, just to get to work is like, you're like, going crazy. Then you get to work and you got to deal with the boss. You got to deal with the person who sits next to you and is so annoying. You got to listen to everybody talk their rubbish. You got to this and that. Or you go to school, the teacher is boring. The students are like this. The classroom's like that. It's a battle. If you have a family, with all due respect, I have a family. All of you have families. Families are a nightmare. Let's be honest. Sisters, right? Fernanda, your sister's not here today, right? We can talk about her. I bet it's a nightmare having a sister. These 2 sisters here, they look really happy. As soon as the camera goes off, they're like duking it out, man. It's like war. So, I have a brother. I remember when I'm the oldest, so being the oldest, it has special quality, right, Varsha? When you're the older sibling, like, yes, you have authority, So, I always wanted, I was like, oh, I hope God gives me a little brother, when my mom was pregnant. And then, by the time we were like 3 or 4, we just used to fight like cats and dogs. To this very day, we can hardly be in the same room together. So it's a real challenge, Just living life is like being on a battlefield. And the more that we accept that that's kind of the thing that we're facing, the more that we can be a little bit relaxed. Because often the biggest stress is that we try to pretend something is the way that it actually isn't. That's the biggest problem. If we're trying to live inside of a lie, if you've ever told a fib, a little white lie, I'm sure none of you have ever told a lie at all, ever in your life. But usually if you tell a lie, then you have to tell another lie. Then you got to tell another lie to cover up for that lie. And then you start to forget how many lies you lived in. Then you start thinking all the lies were reality and true, but they're just not. So often the stress is trying to live inside of something that's not true. So when we begin to accept that actually life is a little bit of a challenging place and it's probably not going to change. Anyone here who's a computer programmer, if you've got, that is the coding of the material world. The matrix is written like this. It's just a place where there's going to be challenges and difficulties. Accept it, face it, and figure out how I'm going to deal with it. But let's not try to pretend that it's all wonderful all the time. That's nice. It's good to be optimistic, but let's be realistic and practical at the same time. So Bhagavad-gita is based on a battlefield, and it's between these two people that you see here. The conversation happens between Krishna and Arjuna. And just like the Bagger Vance film, Krishna, who is kind of, you could say, the guru, but he's taking a humble position, and he's become the sort of chauffeur or the chariot driver of Arjuna. And Arjuna is the skilled warrior. And of course, this conversation is an actual history that took place 5,000 years ago. And at this time, there was a war, and obviously the primary weapons that they were using were bows and arrows. Of course, there's a whole thing about the military science from the Vedas, which means that even though it was bows and arrows, it wasn't quite so simple because they had the potency and power of mantra. And with the power of mantra, they can actually create weapons that far exceed even the weaponry that we have in the modern day. But that's a whole nother conversation. So anyway, Arjuna is the skilled warrior, but he becomes so despondent and so broken because this isn't just any war. It's a war between two families, a war between the same family that has now become divided. So it's kind of like a fratricidal war or a civil war. And Arjuna, he's one of 5 brothers, and he's actually the most skilled warrior in one sense, and everyone's expecting him to lead them to victory. But when he looks at the opponents on the other side, he sees family members, and he sees friends, and he sees even his teachers and seniors, and he becomes so despondent that he thinks, I'm not going to do this. I can't fight. I can't do this. It's too much for me. And he actually wants to run away. And this is a really important point that comes up in the Gita, that sometimes we see that life is so testing and so challenging and so confronting that we just want to run away. We just want to lock ourselves in a room and hide, and we don't want to face it. Am I the only one who's had that experience, or has anyone here ever felt like that? It's just too much, or we just sometimes just, we shut people out because we can't deal with them. So Arjuna is kind of playing that part for us. He's representing us in the Bhagavad Gita, and he's trying to show through his own anxieties, his own sort of depression, his own despondency, his own experiences of kind of like loneliness and wanting to just run away and hide away from things and not face up to situations. He's showing how we also face these things, and that is faced 5,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, and it will be faced 20,000 years into the future, because again, that is the programming of this world, and you're not going to get away from it. More or less, all of us experience the same basic types of emotions, and this is one of those emotions that one becomes so overwhelmed that they want to just give up. So that's a really big topic that's covered in the Bhagavad Gita. Everyone still with me? Yeah, okay. So let's see, we're due to finish at 7:30, right?
Yes.
Yep, okay.
Okay.
Okay, so 10 more minutes, something like that.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
so when you first open the Gita and you start to try to read it, then you start to see a lot of names. Now, for me, I'm from the States. I'm used to Jim, Jack, Johnny, Betsy, Sue, Sarah. That's easy names for me. I mean, that's what I was looking for. Where's Cindy and Bobby? That's, hey, but instead I got this first name right here that I just couldn't even figure, okay, I saw Rashtra and I thought, oh, okay, this is Rastafarian times, it's the Haritar Rastafarian. Yeah, that's what it is. It's the Rastafarian. And it's not a Rastafarian. That's just my poor interpretation of a Sanskrit word. So actually, the word is Dhritarashtra. And you'll see that with Sanskrit, sometimes you get consonants put together that you don't usually see. You don't usually see an R and a T together like that. Usually they're reversed, like train or try or track or trouble. But you don't see the R in front. You think, hey, this must be a misspelling here. What's going on? But actually, that's the word. And a lot of the names I found began with D. And I thought, all these hard names, they begin with D. But to introduce some of the characters so that when you first start to read, you'll have a little bit of background of who these persons are. So Dhritarashtra, this is Dhritarashtra here, okay? So in the very first verse, if you remember when I showed you the Sanskrit, it said Dhritarashtra uvacha, and then it said Dhritarashtra said. So Dhritarashtra is actually the king. And there's a huge history. There's a book called the Mahabharata that explains all the history, and I could get into it, but I'm not going to dive so far into it. But for our purposes, we just need to understand that Dhritarashtra is, unfortunately, he's a blind king. He is physically blind. He was born blind. And he unfortunately has become a little bit of a force for adharma. You can see this word here, adharma. The word dharma, usually it means righteousness. And he's become a force for adharma because the A in front of a word in Sanskrit negates it. So that means it's not righteous. It's actually wicked. He's kind of become a little bit of a wicked person. And Sanjay, this is Sanjay here. Sanjay is a mystic. He's like an advanced yogi, and he has this power that he's able to use extrasensory perception. So he is kind of like Dhritarashtra's eyes. Now Sanjay is good. He's a good person, but he obviously works for a king who's not really so righteous or so just. But he becomes the eyes of Dhritarashtra. And in the first opening statement of the Gita, Dhritarashtra is asking Sanjay to tell him what's happening on the battlefield. I want to know what's happening on the battlefield between my sons and the sons of my brother Pandu. So he's talking about this fratricidal war. And of course, he wants his sons to win. But his sons, as we'll see in a minute, represent the kind of bad guys. They're the bad side. But Sanjay, he's actually a student of Vyasadeva. And if you remember, we mentioned that name earlier. Vyasadeva is the author of the Bhagavad-gita, the original Bhagavad-gita in the Vedic text. So he's an extremely learned person. And Sanjay has studied under him. So he's a very, very advanced mystic or yogi. So this is kind of the scene. And throughout the Gita, you'll hear Sanjay speaking, and he's often explaining to Dhritarashtra what's happening on the battlefield so that Dhritarashtra understands that. Does that make sense to everyone? Everyone's okay with that? Yeah? So then you have Dhritarashtra's oldest son, and his name is Duryodhan. And Duryodhan is really, he's bad news, this guy, to be perfectly honest. He wants the kingdom to himself, and it's really because of his insatiable desire to manipulate, exploit, and control that this war is happening. And he has brothers, many brothers, which are known as the Kauravas, and they're all sons of Dhritarashtra, and they basically represent the forces of evil in the Bhagavad-gita. So they're really on the bad side. Any good book has to pit good against bad. So like that, the Kauravas are the sons of Dhritarashtra, who is the blind king, and they want the kingdom. They want to rule the kingdom. Unfortunately, the kingdom is meant to be in the hands of the Pandavas. And these are the sons of Pandu, who is the brother of Dhritarashtra. But Pandu passed away at a young age. And instead, and in that way, Dhritarashtra took over ruling the kingdom. And when the Pandavas come of rightful age, if you know anything about monarchical hierarchy, when these boys come of age, the eldest son has the natural right to the throne. But Dhritarashtra does not want to give up that throne. And he wants his own son, Duryodhana, to become the king. And in this way, they start to manipulate. And actually, Duryodhana tries in many, many ways to actually kill the Pandavas. So there's a lot of intrigue that goes on behind the scenes leading up to this battle. And the Pandavas are extremely righteous people. They're very dharmic, and their whole life is really dedicated to high levels of spirituality. But their nature is that they're of the princely order. They're like princes, and they're also naturally warriors. But they fight for righteousness. They're not fighting for the principle of evil. They're fighting for goodness and for protection and for justice. But unfortunately, they're being subjugated by the opposition. But they're so humble that they were actually willing to accept even just a little bit of land. They just wanted 5 pieces of land that they could rule over. They didn't, you can have the entire kingdom. We don't even need to have the whole kingdom. Just give us a little bit of land so that we can live and have some dominion, because it's part of our nature. But Duryodhana made this powerful statement, and he said, I will not give you enough land into which you can drive a pin, like a pin, meaning I'm not giving you anything. You won't even get a speck of land from me. If I have my way, you'll all be dead. That was his mood. So because of this, the Pandavas tried everything that they could to prevent war. In fact, they're really more or less peaceful people. But because of the kind of wickedness that was going on, war became inevitable. So Arjuna, he is like really one of the main characters, if not the main character, with Krishna. And he's a great warrior, and he will pose many, many questions in the Bhagavad-gita, as I mentioned earlier, that kind of represents challenges that we ourselves face in our own lives, even in modern time. Even though he's like a great warrior and, destined to, he's a prince like that, but still he has a lot of questions, and he becomes, very despondent. There are also a couple of other characters. Bhishma, he's like the grandfather of the family. And even though he's an extremely righteous person, somehow he winds up on the wrong side. And as well as the teacher of Arjuna and the Pandavas, he's their military teacher. He taught them all the arts of military warfare and so many things, but he also winds up on the wrong side. And because of these two personalities, Arjuna can't bear to think that he has to fight against them, because they're his elders, they're his teachers, his guru. And that's part of the reason why he becomes so despondent. And then, of course, there's Krishna. And Krishna he's a very good friend of Arjuna. He's also a relative. He's the cousin of Arjuna, but he becomes Arjuna's mentor, or he becomes like his guru. And he takes a humble position of just being the chariot driver. But actually, he's more than just a mere mortal man. And that becomes revealed in the pages of the Bhagavad-gita, that actually he's more than just a normal person. So he becomes really, by the second chapter of the Gita, he really becomes the person who's giving instruction and guidance to Arjuna and trying to help him to gain the correct perspective on life so that he can be empowered again to move forward, to do what he needs to do, and to give up the weakness of heart that he's finding himself in. So that basically brings us to the kind of conclusion of the setting of the scene of the Gita, and brings us back to this point where the war is about to happen, and how the Bhagavad Gita basically begins. And usually at this point, I do a little bit of a session called The Search for Happiness, but unfortunately we don't have time for it, so maybe we'll have to do it next week or next time.
Yeah.
Is everyone okay with that, or was that like overload central, too much information, and like, wow, what is going on? This guy's tripping, man. He's tripping.
I have 3 pages of notes, so it's quite good.
Oh, okay, that's good.
No,
I
that
was
was
going to
great.
say, I've written like loads on that as well. I love
Oh,
it.
this is
Thank
awesome.
you.
Okay, great. So I've said to Vrishni that we can send you a Gita. So really the point of taking time and doing this is so that when you get the book, you don't become so bewildered. At least a few things you remember. Oh yeah, that's the Sanskrit, and that's this. And oh, I remember that blind king guy. Oh, and Krishna, he's like something in there. So at least a few things will be a little bit more accessible for you and not be bewildering. So like that. Anyone has any questions or comments or reflections, anything you would like to reflect back, anything that I said that maybe you thought, okay, yeah, I can relate to that, or that was interesting. Or if anyone wants to chastise me or offer some heavy criticisms, okay, no problem. Anything?
No, it was a great introduction, Jai. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone wrote, some people said they had notes. Was there anything you wrote down in your notes that you thought, oh yeah, that's interesting, okay.
The thing that I found really interesting, because I've got the Gita, but I haven't really read much of it yet because I got really overwhelmed as well, like you were saying.
Yep,
But I find it interesting how it's on a battlefield, because that is so symbolic of life. That makes so much sense to me.
yep.
So yeah, and thank you as well for explaining the kind of the way that Sanskrit goes into English, because, and like the translation, because I totally agree. I find it really intimidating. So I'm really looking forward to now actually knowing what's going on.
Yay, good.
Yeah.
I feel success in my life. And I tell you, Ellie, you look so much brighter and like as if you've been
Yeah.
healed from within. You know?
I think that talks like put up my energy.
Well, because everything actually is generated from the spiritual platform. And the more that we absorb ourselves in the spiritual energy, it's such a healing power, such a healing energy, you know? So it's really dynamic. So anyway, nice to see you happy and smiling. Be thou healed.
Thank you.
Vishal, Prabhu, anything that stood out for you?
I'd heard of it, but like it was interesting to see how many people are involved in the actual storyline, because I knew like there was Krishna and Arjuna, but I didn't know how they were related or who the other people were in it.
Okay.
It's cleared it out, so it's quite good.
Yeah, there's lots of names in that first chapter. Whew, man. even now when I read it, I'm teaching on Sundays. We have a course called the Bhakti Shastri, and I'm teaching that on Sundays. And you know, just to read through the first chapter is still, even though I've read it probably hundreds of times, some of the names and knowing who all the characters are. But that's one of the wonderful things excuse me, the more that you read it and study, the more you'll get to know who those people are, and the more sense it will make over time. So that's good. Thank you, Vishal, for that. I see that Marcella, she's joined us. Hello, Marcella, are you there?
Hi, I'm here. Sorry, I was a bit late.
No problem.
I'm here listening.
Okay. Okay, no problem. Was there anything that you heard that you would like to reflect back? Anything that stood out for you?
No, I think I got, when you start, I forgot the names now, talking about the Blind King. That I remember. But everything is new to me, so it was quite interesting.
Okay.
But I'm hoping to be able to get I see that it's being recorded, so if I can watch it later, it would be very, very helpful, because it seems like it was very, very interesting.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll make the recording available.
Thank you.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, I really want to watch it from the beginning.
Okay, great.